Welcome to the very first interview of Future of Internet. To kick off the series, we're honored to have Dave Butler, Head of Product at Nillion. Dave, I saw that your career began at NASA. Can you tell us about that experience?
I worked at NASA in 2018, and I was there. I was out there applying my research. My research and my PhD was in formal methods and cryptography, which I'll touch on later. But it's basically having computers prove mathematical statements. So some of the work I did out there, we were looking at. It was a little bit ahead of its time. It was nice. We were looking at autonomous drones. So not kind of drones that you fly, sort of 20 feet in your garden, but ones that are properly up in the air and are basically like unmanned planes, right? And we were trying to basically do the safety analysis around this. So if you have lots of these unmanned drones in the air, you need them not to crash into each other. So we were doing some safety analysis about how far out does your radar need to see in order to make sure that you can take safe, evasive action with your drones, with your unmanned aircraft, and sort of get them to ground if there's a threat or if there's basically traffic in the air. And I think this was a bit ahead of its time because at that point, drones, they weren't kind of so mainstream. But we look on, I think 6 or 7 years later now, and they're kind of mainstream, right? And there's a lot more traffic in the air than there was back then, and likely there will be even more traffic in the air moving forward. So it was quite funny. So about 2 weeks into this, I spent 4 or 5 months out there, I think, in California at the NASA Ames Research Center, and about 2 weeks in, they just presented their safety case to the aviation agency. I forget what the acronym is, and they realized that we realized that there was a big mistake in it. It was actually quite simple to correct, but we realized this after about 2 weeks, and I spent most of the rest of my time correcting that mistake and then formally proving that it was actually safe and that we could get our drones out of the way quickly enough under various assumptions. So yeah, that's what I did at NASA. It was fun.
After reaching for the stars at NASA, you then dove deep into the world of data and research at the Alan Turing Institute. What was the focus of your work there, and what discovery impacted you the most?
So my PhD was at the Alan Turing Institute and joint with the University of Edinburgh. My research was at the intersection of formal methods, so that's getting computers to prove theorems, and cryptography. And I think I was the first person to formally verify or prove under formal methods various things in MPC, so multi-party computation. So that was really fun. We were taking some of the earlier protocols, so stuff from the early 2000s, and we were basically proving. I built a framework that could reason about this stuff and proved them under the simulation paradigm, if people have heard of that. Basically proving that the protocols were actually secure under various different security definitions. And a fun fact: I was in the first cohort of students at the Alan Turing Institute doing their PhD the first year, and not that I started off with this goal, but towards the end it became a bit of a race between a couple of us to submit and pass our PhD, pass our vivas first. So I think I was actually the first person ever at the Alan Turing Institute to get their PhD, which was quite fun. But it was aided by I had no corrections to make because formal methods, kind of the proofs are either correct or not. So I was lucky; I had no corrections in my fiver, which was good.
Great insights from the Turing Institute, Dave. So tell me, if you could send an AI to space tomorrow, what mission would you choose?
I think if I was to send AI on a mission to space tomorrow, let's assume that it's a kind of a physical form AI and can do lots of things. I think I'd just send it out there to see if it can survive. Like there's so many unknowns in space that we don't know about, and I don't want to send a human out there to try it. So I think I'd just send it to the planet we can get it to the furthest away. Maybe Mars is realistic, and just go, come on, see what you can do. See if you can survive. I'm sure we'll learn lots of stuff with that. It'll probably do it better than us because it doesn't need quite as much water. I guess maybe it needs some sort of solar power stuff, but yeah, I think I just do that, see what it can do, see if it can build a mini civilization. Probably have to put it out there for 20 years, but that would be quite fun. Yeah, so nothing more scientific than that, but just use it as an experiment, like when we used to send dogs into space. That's probably not very.
From space missions back to Earth and into startups. Dave, before Nillion, you co-founded a deep tech venture. What's the biggest lesson you took from that experience?
Yeah, I founded a deep tech startup out of the PhD with a couple of others from the PhD. I think we raised, I can't remember, about £5 million over a 3 or 4 year period. Um, Ultimately, it didn't work. We were trying to quantify developer experience. So, given someone's GitHub profile, what are they good at? And we built AI models around this. It was kind of before LLMs, right? Before the big AI boom now. So we're doing AI a little bit more, I guess, first principles or more kind of old school style. What do I take away from it? I think um, you need to just move fast, right? I think in startups, you will almost certainly be wrong with any decision that you make initially. So doing something quickly is much better than not doing anything. I think that's even more exaggerated now because we were living in the world where AI couldn't quite build you your app from scratch in 20 minutes. Um, but nowadays it's even more quickly, right? You may as well just get on with it, right? There's no point as a product person writing a PRD, just go and build an interactive demo. So moving quickly there, and I think I really understood the how important commercials are. I think we initially had a bit of a thought of, oh, let's build something, and we built something quite cool. We scaled a kind of a platform to, I can't remember, 40,000 users, 50,000 users. But the real key is the commercial side of this, or a big component of this, and we never quite worked that out. If I'm honest, we built a relatively reasonable product. Wasn't perfect, but relatively reasonable. But being at Nillion, I think seeing the captive audience that we have is really nice, because that first startup experience taught me that you can have any type of product in the world, but actually, if you can't take that to get that in the hands of the right people who actually may see use in it, they may not see use in it straight away, but at least some use in it over time, and you can work with those people. It's really hard. So yeah, I think that's what I learned from that. But it was great fun. Straight out the PhD with basically no experience. Yeah, doing a company from -1 to one was really cool.
Lessons learned. Now let's talk about the next big chapter. Nillion. How did this adventure begin?
My Nillion adventure. So I left my previous startup and was kind of thinking about what I want to do. I had a few months off, a couple of months off, which was fun just to reset. And then I found Nillion, and it was really nice because if you think about my background, I used to be in academia in cryptography, and at my previous startup that I founded, I was sort of head of product, looking after that side of things. So this product role at Nillion, where it's basically crypto company, cryptography company, as well as a crypto Web3 company, seemed like a kind of perfect fit. So that was nice. And I think I was initially intrigued. My background is in pets, right, in cryptography, but I used to get frustrated with academia because in academia, everyone always talks about impact. You have these impact ratings, etc. But basically what that means is how many other people cited your work, which actually has kind of zero impact. It doesn't ever get out of this little play world. And it's interesting, right? Academia is important, but I used to get frustrated by this because you never seem to be able to get out of your little ecosystem and actually affect the real world. So I thought this is awesome. So this is a company. Nillion's a company where we're trying to take pets to the real world, and that's actually the hardest thing to do. It may seem like the hardest thing to do in security and in privacy is a 10% improvement on a particular protocol or some FHE thing or some really complex MPC stuff. But I've done that in the past, right? And yes, that's difficult. But the actual hardest problem is making security and privacy technology relevant to people and making them want to use it and seeing a need to use it. That's by far a harder problem than making a protocol 10% harder. That's not me belittling, the sort of real details of things, because I've been there and done that. But on a global scale, like making privacy enhancing technologies mainstream is a really hard problem. So I thought, yeah, let's go with Nillion. Let's see what we can do here. Let's see if we can actually take these academic cryptographic principles and these technologies and actually take them to market and see what we can do. And I think we're not there yet, but we're making a good fist of this, right? I think some of the stuff that we've done is potentially some of the more large scale, wide scale adoption of MPC, certainly, which is really nice. So we've got a way to go, but yeah, that's what really intrigued me. Let's see if we can actually make this sort of somewhat mainstream, and let's take on that challenge. So I thought that would be fun.
Super. We've got the starting point of Nillion. Now let's go further. Dave, what does your daily life as head of product really look like?
So day to day at Nillion, right now the one app that we're focusing most of our attention on at the app layer is NilGPT. So that is just making micro decisions every day about how we're implementing things. So for example, This morning I was testing out some of our new web search capabilities, right? So we are consuming our web search functionality from NilAI, which is one of our core components. We want to think about putting that in NilGPT. I got an early version of it the other day, and this morning I was starting to test that and understand, okay, what's the type of query that our users are going to make here? How does this work? Does it fit? And I made some observations and then sort of a bit of feedback for our NilAI team, and hopefully they'll be improving that across a number of dimensions in the context of NilGPT, because that's where we want to put it first, as well as obviously make it available in our API. So that's on the kind of our app layer, where NilGPT is the main thing right now. But then also looking after our core roadmap. So we have our core blind modules, which are NilDB, NilAI, and NilCC. So NilDB is our data storage under MPC product. NilAI, fairly self-explanatory, the private and secure AI, and then NilCC. Actually, NilAI runs on NilCC. NilCC is our confidential compute platform, where you can run any workload. So I can basically write any code and put it in a Docker image and then run it securely on NilCC. So there's loads of micro decisions every day, right, to be diving into with the engineers, and I really like to get into the details, like really into the weeds with the engineers. We're not, obviously NilGPT is a web app, but generally we're not just building standard run-of-the-mill web apps here, right? Especially the blind modules are complex architectures and complex pieces of software that we need to get into the details of. It's not like I just write a spec and say, oh, we need a permissioning system in NilDB, and then some engineer thinks of some permissioning system and implements it, right? I have to go back and forth with the engineers a lot because it's a lot more nuanced, and these micro decisions, these implementation decisions that we are making, whereas in a normal run-of-the-mill web app, make no difference how you implement a database, for example. They make a real difference here. So that's really what I like to do. So on a day-to-day basis, that's a lot of it. And then obviously stepping back, I'm looking at our kind of roadmap into the future, right? Where are the trends going? What do we need to be doing in the future? And I think there's a few things to think about here, because I can think about what we might do in 6 months, but often I don't need to act on that too much. I just need to have discussions with people and understand, okay, this is maybe where we are going. It's normally on about a 3-month time horizon that we have a decent idea of where we're going. And I'll sort of start to write some stuff down. Okay, we're pretty sure that in 3 months we want to head here. But then as the time gets shorter and shorter, kind of stuff becomes closer, we have more confidence on it. So we may have a good idea about where we're going in 3 months, but maybe there's 30% variability. But as we get closer and closer, of course, to starting to implement that thing, we have less variance on what we're actually going to do, and things become more clear. So yeah, hopefully that gives an idea of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis.
And beyond the daily grind, there had to be a moment that really made you say, wow, this is Nillion. What was that moment for you?
I've been at Nillion for a year and 9 months or something like that. I think the first properly wow moment, we decided to build NilDB. So we decided to sort of change the storage solution we offered slightly about November or December last year. I forget the actual date. And we decided on NilDB, which is a sort of slightly simplified version, still storing everything under MPC. And then in January or February, one of our FEs, which is our founding entrepreneurs, so one of our ecosystem partners, people that build on us, they were doing, they're tracking, they're called SoraChain, and they track telemetry data in cars, right? So I put a box in my car, and then when I go left and right, it sends some data and it stores that data, right? And they were just starting a new campaign. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think it might have been a competition of some sort. And they were streaming a lot of data. We knew they were going to be streaming a lot of data to NilDB. And in a month, I think they stored about 200 million data points in NilDB. Now, that was really cool because A, it worked, but B, basically no one noticed, right? And I think what we then proved is that we can store, we have built a genuinely production grade MPC storage solution, storage layer, which is really nice. And we could do, they were doing aggregate computations on it, etc. So it was also usable. It had utility, this data. And that was really cool because for a long time we were sort of in research mode, etc. But then once that came out and I saw that was the realization that yes, actually this stuff works like at serious scale. 200 million data points, that's a lot of data points. So yeah, that was really cool. That was probably one of the first, like, yeah, this might go somewhere. It's nice.
That was the moment that hooked you. But if you had to boil it down, what's the one unique superpower that sets Nillion apart?
A unique superpower of Nillion, I think, from my perspective, what I like is we have realized the hardest problem in privacy technology is not actually necessarily the cryptography. Now that can be very hard, and I think I touched on this earlier, but that can be hard, but that is not the hardest problem. The hardest problem is making people care. People normally care about privacy after the fact. They care about it after their data's been leaked. They don't care about it up front. So I think we realize that. So yes, we have the cryptographic chops or the ability to, I don't know, take a protocol and work out a 10% improvement, which is very difficult from an academic and intellectual perspective. But I think what we have worked out, and what I like to think one of our superpowers is that we have understood that that is not necessarily how or why you win in this game. The way that you win is make privacy relatable and usable and put it in the center of people's workflows and make it real, right? And actually let people do stuff with it. And that is the hardest problem. And that's really the problem that we're trying to focus on, or one of the main problems we're trying to focus on. How do we take privacy to the masses? Because generally, and it's a harsh reality, people do not care about privacy, even though it's important. And they don't care about it because it's not useful. They don't care about it because at that point in time, it does not affect their lives. For example, enter something into ChatGPT, enter my example from earlier. Oh, this is my name. This is where I live. Here are all my medical conditions. Here's my doctor's report. Give me an analysis of it. At that point in time, they are not thinking about their privacy. But in 5 years, when that data gets leaked, they really care about their privacy because they've just leaked their doctor's report to the world, right? And I think that's one of our superpowers, that we are thinking about that user experience, or that how do we embed privacy and how do we make it easy for people in their lives, and not necessarily just about, oh, how do we make this protocol 10% faster? So yeah, I think that's one of our superpowers, which is nice.
Incredible, right? And it doesn't stop there. Let's dive into NilGPT. How did this groundbreaking idea come to life?
NilGPT was born. One of our DevRels, Tom, came up with a demo of it. Basically, I think it was either a hackathon or a demo that he was building one week, just to test out Nillion stack. And he sort of presented it to us, and it was a basic version. It looked a bit different, but broadly this similar functionality, right? You know, you could chat with it, etc. And yeah, it just went from there. And then Tom we prioritized kind of the first version of that, which came out, I forget now, maybe a month and a half ago. The kind of bit that went into closed beta, and then it was clear, like, yeah, actually, this is something we want to focus on as our reference app, as like the main bit of our app layer. And then we gave it a little bit more resource, but there's still only sort of 1.5, 2 people working on NilGPT. It's definitely not the whole team. So Tom was heavily involved to start with, and then a couple of other of our devs of also helping. But yeah, that's where it was born. It was just a hackathon project. Which is great.
A fascinating story. But let's get straight to it. If you had to define NilGPT in just one sentence, what's its unique value?
NilGPT's value proposition in one sentence. I'm not sure if I can do it in one sentence, but I think it would be something like NilGPT gives you provable, verifiable trust and privacy. We are not hiding anything, right? So a lot of these privacy in quotation marks, privacy preserving AI systems are actually just terms and conditions which say we promise not to look at your data. But actually what we are delivering is something that's genuinely provably private, because you can look at our open source code, you can see the attestations, we're hiding nothing, and it's verifiably private, which I think is really nice. And I think that's what I would say is the main unique value, as well as providing basically the same functionality as any other private AI.
Clear and powerful, but let's get concrete. With the latest update, what has really changed for users?
So depending on exactly when this goes out, it will depend on what the most recent update is, because kudos to the team here, we're actually shipping a fairly major update about once a week now. So some of the interesting things that we've released recently are, it's now fully open source, the NilGPT code base, so anyone can go and look at what we're doing there. We have an attestation flow in there, so all of our stuff all of our backend runs in TEs, right? At least the AI inference and everything's channeled through NilCC, which is our confidential compute backend. But these are only actually mean anything if you get the attestations out, which prove 2 things. It proves that it's running on a TE, so the environment is genuinely secure, and you can go and trace back the authenticity of that. But also the measurement hash of the attestation is basically the hash of the code that's being used. It's slightly more nuanced than that, but you can then go and take that measurement hash and you can compare it to the measurement hash of the actual open source code base. And if those two are the same, then you have high confidence that the code, well, no, you don't have high confidence. You know that the code that is in the open source GitHub repo is actually the code that's being run inside the TE. Because actually, if you think about it, open sourcing a GitHub repo, that doesn't, normally, that doesn't mean anything, because it means, yes, here's some code that we're claiming to run, but unless you can guarantee that that is actually the code that's being run for the app, nothing holds. But what the attestation allows you to do is guarantee that. So you compare these two measurement hashes, and as long as they're the same, you have confidence, you know that the code in the open source repo is actually the one that is being run for the app that you're using. A few other things. We recently launched a PWA, which is a progressive web app. That is probably a precursor to us considering fully fledged mobile apps on iOS and Android. So you can basically have the app on your home screen on your mobile, which is really nice. Things that are coming soon, which may or may not be out by the time this goes out. We're increasing the size of the models that we're using. We're putting image generation, image upload in there, so you can upload images and get responses. Potentially PDF uploads, CSV uploads, all things that are coming somewhat soon. And another big one would be web search. Now, I don't know exactly when this is coming out, but yeah, those are a few things that may have just been released or will soon to be coming out. So yeah, exciting times ahead.
This update is a real turning point. And naturally, it brings us to the rankings. What's your take on our LLM privacy ranking and the way it evaluates models?
I think the LLM privacy ranking is nice. I think what's important is we need to have discourse. We need to have discussion about the pros and cons of AI in the modern era. I would be the first to say, I use ChatGPT all the time, right? I think it's unbelievably powerful. It is probably 5x'd my speed of just doing basic tasks, right? Which is awesome. But I think we need to have a public discussion, and this is what your LLM privacy ranking is enabling in some sorts. And these discussions need to happen everywhere, right? Not just here, but in different places as well. But we need to have discussion about the pros and cons of this. The pros are obvious. It's productivity, etc. But the cons are also need to be discussed and are often overlooked. So I think it's really nice that we're starting to have that discussion. There's going to have to be lots of people involved in these discussions. But I think any way that tries to promote these discussions and just spark debate. And it's not saying that one privacy ranking framework is definitely better than another. But it's just trying to have this debate about the pros and cons here, because I think really we're heading in a slightly dangerous direction that people are just assuming that all of their data is secure when they're using these centralized AI platforms, which is just not necessarily true.
At the time of this interview, NilGPT is still ranked second, but with the September update, many believe the top spot could be yours. How do you react, Dave?
Yeah, I know that NilGPT is currently second in the rankings. I think potentially we go up to first. I think that's cool, right? That's nice. I don't think what we are trying to do at Nillion or NilGPT is claim that we're the best at absolutely everything. We are just trying to offer an opinionated option for people. I feel like it's important that people understand the pros and cons of the different options they have. Ranging from something like ChatGPT at one end to maybe us at the other end. So ChatGPT offers absolutely state-of-the-art models. They're all proprietary. We could not serve their models if we wanted to, right? They have billions of dollars and they research these models, and that is their absolute, that's their area of expertise, but they're not very private. It's not very secure. Whereas we're at the other end and we're taking models off the shelf. So you get a very reasonable productivity gain, but you also have sort of guaranteed, provable, verifiable privacy, which is very nice. And I think what's really important to us is that people have the option to use that. Because I would not advocate that people use NilGPT for every single query they ever have. I certainly don't, right? But what is important is when they have those once a day or 3 or 4 times a week, when they have something more private to ask and they need the input of AI, that they have the option to use a genuinely privacy-preserving app like NilGPT. And I think that is the really important thing. And yeah, it's really nice if we come out near the top or at the top of these privacy rankings. But that's what's really important. It's giving people this optionality that they don't have to just rely on centralized AI. Because AI, people are going to go and use ChatGPT. It's such a good productivity gain that they, of course, will go and use it. But it's important that people have a similar productivity gain with the option of privacy. And that's what I think is really important. And if we happen to come out near the top of some people's rankings, that's really nice.
In the end, rankings don't matter. The real question is privacy. Will it be the decisive factor for the next generation of LLM?
I think privacy of LLMs over the next generation. It's hard to define what generation is, but maybe let's say that's 2 years, right? I think will be important. I don't think it will be the only factor. I think the reality of the situation is that the frontier labs, so those making these foundational models, this are the 5 or 6 labs around the world that are really leading this, will always have the best models. And realistically, their very best models will always be proprietary. They won't be open source. So they will be serving the best models. So I will have to go to ChatGPT or to Claude or to wherever to actually use those best models. And I would advocate for that. That's brilliant. These models are an unbelievable productivity gain. One aside, the price of those models is going to go up at some point, right? The VCs, whoever, the investors are subsidizing these models massively. There is no way that they cost whatever it is, 10 cents per million tokens. Anyway, that's an aside. However, what I think will change, or I hope will change for the sake of, I guess, humanity, although maybe that's not a grandiose statement, is that people understand the privacy connotations with using these centralized, not terribly private or secure providers. Yes, they provide the best productivity, and you can see a theme, right, in many of my answers here. They provide the best productivity, but people need an option. And I really hope that over the next generation, let's say the next 2 years of LLMs, that people start to understand that the privacy aspect of this is important. Because if not, these centralized AI providers are going to be sitting on the most valuable and the most dangerous data set of all time. Like, they're going to have people's lives in there, and they already do, right? But it's going to be even more of a problem. And I really hope that switch is made, right, of people, and they realize, yes, ChatGPT is absolutely fantastic for certain things, but when I need to ask something that's slightly private, I need to go and find a privacy preserving alternative. Maybe that's NilGPT, maybe that's something else. Maybe another privacy alternative turns up that's also really good, and that's fine. But I really hope that the mindset shift in the mainstream user of AI it enables them to consider the privacy of what they're doing as well as just the productivity gains. And I really hope that that's the decisive factor in the next couple of years.
And looking ahead, in your opinion, what will the internet look like in 10 years when it comes to privacy?
My vision for the internet in the next 10 years in relation to privacy, that's interesting. So I think what's becoming clear to me, and I may be wrong, right, is that the internet, as most people view and see it, which is essentially a search engine, is now reducing to, it used to be Google, right? And that's the search engine. I do SEO, search engine optimization. Now I do my internet searches inside AI, right? And that goes and searches the web for me, and it's just better at searching the web than I am in most cases. So I think it's reducing essentially to these LLM platforms. And I think, as I said in some of my previous answers, I just hope that privacy is a concern, is something that it's not actually the very first thing on people's mind, but in 10 years, I really hope, and I think this will be the case, because I think in the next 10 years, there will be significant enough data breaches that affect all of us that just make it so obvious that we need to consider privacy. Because at some point, most of one of the major AI players, most of their database is going to be leaked. I'm fairly sure of that, right? We're already seeing things, the ChatGPT, the Claude the shared chats, they're being indexed by Google, right? So anyone could read them. So I hope that in 10 years' time, before entering anything into an LLM, people understand, okay, what are the privacy connotations of me doing this? And I hope that that's the case. I don't know whether that will be the case, but I would imagine that would be the case, because something disastrous will happen before then that leaks basically one of these massive databases, these centralized lakes of people's data, and it becomes so unbelievably obvious that we need to be careful.
Now let's zoom in on Nillion. In your opinion, how would you sum up its vision for the future of AI and privacy in just one sentence?
Nillion's privacy for the future of AI and privacy. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but it's about giving people optionality. I'll repeat once more, and hopefully the last time I'll repeat this, but people will use the best frontier models for most things, but they need to have the option to do things privately for that once a day query or that few times a week where they need some extra privacy and they know that if they input that into a centralized AI and that gets leaked, it could do them harm. They have to have that option. And that's what Nillion, I think, is providing. That's our vision, providing that layer of optionality for the 10% of queries that are private and have concerns around privacy. And that's what happens. And I think that's our vision.
We've covered vision and the future. Now, let's switch gears. If you could invite 3 people, alive or dead, to dinner to talk about AI and space, who would they be?
3 people who I'd invite to a dinner party to talk about AI. Okay, the first one would be Alan Turing. I think sort of one of the godfathers of computer science. I was at the Alan Turing Institute. I think that should be interesting, right, to see what somebody who could see the vision of what computer science could bring us, but didn't sort of live, is before the time that all the modern stuff really came, especially obviously in this very recent era. That would be interesting just to get their perspective. Like, is what we have now something that they could have envisioned, or is it absolutely nothing like it? And they're actually really surprised by where we've ended up from what they thought we would end up with when they were sort of starting out. The second one, I'd go even further back in time. I'd get somebody who I really respect. So, okay, Galois is my favourite mathematician. Galois theory, the story goes, he spent a night he was in the Bastille, he was imprisoned, he died at the age of 21 in a duel over a love affair. He wrote down Galois theory like the night before this duel. Whether or not that's true or not, but it's a great story. My favourite mathematician, I'd like to get somebody's point of view who has no idea about any of this really. They're obviously incredibly intelligent and incredibly switched on in their time, in their field, but just to see what on earth they would make of where we've ended up. He was doing, abstract algebra, just to get their opinion on where we've ended up now would be really interesting. And then the third person, I'd have to have, I'm going to cheat here. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to say myself, and it doesn't need to be myself. It would be one of my friends, someone that I respect now that I work with, but at the end of their life. So I'd kind of get someone in the future. And not because maybe myself, not because I'd have any particular amazing insights or because I'm sort of going to come up with anything brilliant, but because I think a lot of the things that we don't know now will be so obvious in 70 years' time, in 60 years' time, that we'll look back and go, oh, wow, why did we not think of that? Or why did we not think about things in that way? And I think that would be really interesting. That's cheating a bit, but yeah, I'd pick myself or one of my co-workers that I respect, their future self, let's say in 50 years' time, because there's always things that are so obvious at the end or after the fact, and I'd like to get that now. That's cheating a little bit, but those are the 3, Turing, Galois, and then a future version of myself or one of my colleagues.
After such a dinner, let's get back down to earth. What's your guilty pleasure after a deep tech day?
My guilty pleasure, I love exercise. Me and my family, we do lots of exercise, so that's good fun. We've got a dog, lots of walking with him. And I love The Office, the American version of The Office. Like, I think it's the greatest TV show of all time. So I just kind of, sometimes when my wife's away, I have a couple of weeks at home on my own. Most nights I'll just have The Office on for 2 or 3 episodes. I think it's brilliant. Like, Dwight Schrute, I think, is my hero. I think he's the greatest character ever invented. And I think The Office, I think I've watched it all the way through probably 5 times now. I finished it a few weeks ago. I should probably start again from season 1, episode 1, or the pilot episode. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think the British version's good in its own way, but I think the American version just has a charm to it that's just unbelievable. I absolutely love it.
And finally, beyond tech, what legacy would you like to leave behind?
What legacy would I like to leave? I don't think I'm going to do anything novel enough for people to really care about my legacy, but I think I would like to have the people that I work with enjoy working with me. I think my kind of principles generally are things are never as complicated. Things can always be more simple. And what I really like to do is take simple things and put them together, combine them in slightly non-trivial ways, and often you can form really fantastic results. And I think, if I don't like the word legacy, but if I wanted to kind of, imprint my philosophy on others, it would be just take simple things and combine them in simple ways, but actually the output can be often really remarkable and actually not appear simple. I think often in life everyone tries to make complex things, and I think complex things are bad. And we should all just try and do simple things, because simple things done really well actually are seriously impactful.
Dave, thank you so much for your time and insights. This has been truly fascinating, and we're proud to have you as the very first guest in our interview series. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, we're counting on you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and share it across your networks.